He was the last forgotten boy on the school steps, waiting in the cold, while the other children were already home. Then, a very wealthy man stopped his car upon noticing that empty gaze. When the boy's trembling voice revealed it was his birthday, the emotional millionaire invited him to celebrate together. It was late afternoon in Boston, and the temperature was dropping as the autumn day moved toward evening. Outside Hawthorne Elementary School, an 8-year-old boy named Michael sat on the front steps, waiting for someone to pick him up. He wore a faded red sweatshirt that had seen many washes. He held his backpack on his lap and tried to stay warm. The sky was slightly overcast, and there were a few dry leaves scattered across the pavement. Michael glanced at the street from time to time, hoping to see a familiar figure approach. The school day had ended more than 2 hours ago. Other students had left with their parents or guardians soon after the final bell. Michael had watched them go, one by one, until he was the only one left. Some children had waved goodbye to him earlier, and he had waved back. At that time, he still believed his mother would arrive soon. She had promised that she would pick him up on this special day. It was his birthday, and he had imagined a small celebration at home. Now, he was alone, and the emptiness of the schoolyard made him feel nervous and uncertain. Inside, a few staff members were finishing their tasks. A receptionist had taken a quick look outside earlier and noticed the boy sitting quietly. She assumed someone would come for him soon. It was not uncommon for parents to be late, especially those who worked long hours. She told herself that there must be a good reason why the boy was still there. Perhaps traffic was bad, or there had been a misunderstanding about the time. Still, she could not help feeling a bit concerned. Michael tried not to show his frustration. He moved slightly on the concrete step to find a more comfortable position. The steps were cold and hard, and his back was getting sore from sitting for so long. He pulled the sleeves of his sweatshirt down to cover more of his hands. He tried to think of something positive. Maybe his mother would arrive with a special treat. Maybe she would take him somewhere nice, as she had hinted the night before. He remembered her tired voice on the phone, telling him not to worry and that today would be different. Time seemed to slow down. Cars passed by without stopping. Michael watched them come and go, but none belonged to anyone he knew. He thought about standing up and walking around, but he did not want to miss his mother if she appeared suddenly. He looked at his small digital watch, a gift from a previous birthday. He realized that he had been waiting for a long time. The sun was lower in the sky, and it felt even colder than before. He tried to recall other birthdays. Most had been simple. His mother worked as a nurse in 2 different hospitals. She was always busy, always rushing from one job to the next. He understood that she had to do it to pay their bills and keep a roof over their heads. He never complained. But on his birthday, he had hoped she would somehow find a way to be there when school ended. He had hoped they could share a meal, maybe a small cake, and talk about his day. As more time passed, a faint tension grew inside him. He felt abandoned, even though he knew she had not done it on purpose. He blinked hard to push back tears. He did not want to cry. He told himself he was old enough to handle waiting a little longer. Still, he could not ignore the emptiness in his stomach or the stiffness in his legs. He rubbed his hands together, trying to stay warm. A teacher's aide left the building and paused near the door, looking at Michael. She asked if he was all right and if someone was coming for him. Michael forced a small smile and said yes, his mother would arrive soon. The aide nodded and went on her way, but she seemed uncertain. Michael knew that staying out here for so long was not normal. He wondered if the school would close completely soon. He did not know what would happen if he was still there when they locked up. Michael looked at the street again. He saw pedestrians walking home, carrying bags of groceries, talking on cell phones, or just hurrying to get out of the cold. None of them paid much attention to the boy sitting alone on the school steps. He felt invisible. He considered asking one of them for help, but he remembered what he had learned about strangers. He was not sure if it was safe. and he also felt embarrassed to admit that no one had come for him. The minutes turned into what felt like hours. He wiped his face on his sleeve when he felt tears forming again. He tried to think of a reason that could explain the delay. Perhaps his mother was stuck at work, dealing with an urgent situation. Maybe her phone was dead, and she could not call him. Maybe there had been an accident. He did not like that last thought, so he pushed it away. He wanted to believe that she would appear at any moment, running toward him and apologizing for being late. But the reality was that he was still alone, and the day was growing darker. The schoolyard looked empty and quiet. The few staff members who remained seemed to be finishing their duties. Michael understood that it was unusual for anyone to be waiting this long. He felt a growing weight in his chest as he realized that his birthday might pass without any recognition. He swallowed hard and tried not to cry again. Finally, he understood that he had to face the possibility that his mother might not come soon. He wondered if he should go inside and ask someone to help him contact her. He was not sure if that would help, but he had no other ideas. He looked behind him at the school's entrance. He knew the building well, but it felt strange to consider going back inside after everyone else had gone home. Still, he remained where he was, staring at the empty street. Each passing minute made him feel more alone. He wondered how much longer he could wait before he had to make a decision. In his mind, he asked himself why this was happening on his birthday. He did not know the answer, and that uncertainty hurt more than anything else. Michael continued to sit on the cold steps, watching the street for any sign of his mother. The sky had grown a bit darker, and a few streetlights were turning on. He felt the chill more strongly now, and tried to warm himself by rubbing his hands together. His sweatshirt was not thick enough for this kind of weather, especially after sitting still for so long. He felt hunger as well, since he had not eaten since lunch. He tried to remember exactly what his mother had said the night before. She had sounded hopeful. She had told him that this birthday would be special, that she would try her best to leave work on time. Now he began to understand that something must have gone wrong. Perhaps there was a medical emergency at the hospital. He knew she often stayed longer if a patient needed her. He admired her dedication, but he wished it did not mean he had to wait alone in front of the school on his birthday. Michael glanced at his watch again. Every time he checked the time, he felt more disappointed. He considered going back inside, but he did not want to bother the staff again. He had already told them he was fine. He regretted saying that, because now it would be awkward to admit he needed help. He felt trapped by his own pride. He wanted to show that he could handle himself, but he was only 8 years old. Another school employee passed by on the inside, looking through the glass doors. Michael caught her eye, and she opened the door slightly to ask if he was still waiting. He nodded and forced a smile. She suggested that he wait inside the lobby where it was warmer, but Michael politely refused. He worried that if his mother came and did not see him outside, she would think he had gone home somehow. He preferred to stay right where he was, even though he was uncomfortable. The woman looked concerned but did not insist. She said that the school would close soon and that he should consider going inside. Michael thanked her and turned his gaze back toward the street. He felt a lump in his throat as he realized the school might lock up for the night, leaving him with no place to go. He thought about asking her to call his mother's phone, but he suspected she already tried that. Besides, if his mother was in the middle of a critical situation, she might not be able to answer. Time dragged on. Michael grew more anxious and sad. He began to cry softly, covering his face so that nobody would see. He felt ashamed for crying, but he did not know what else to do. He was tired, hungry, and cold. He had looked forward to this day, yet it was turning into a memory he would rather forget. He tried to think about other children in his class, wondering if they ever waited alone like this. He doubted it. Most of them had parents who arrived on time or had alternative arrangements. Another 10 minutes passed, and Michael felt completely drained. He had been sitting on these steps for far too long. He pictured his mother hurrying through hospital corridors, answering calls, dealing with emergencies. He wondered if she even remembered what day it was. He knew she loved him, but he also knew that her work often came first. He did not blame her for being a nurse. He understood that her job was important. He only wished that it did not always interfere with important moments in his life. A janitor stepped outside and asked Michael if he wanted to come in. Michael hesitated again. He felt stuck. If he said yes, he would admit that he needed help and that his mother had not arrived. If he said no, he would have to endure the cold and the uncertainty. He chose to remain outside. The janitor shrugged, told him to take care, and warned that the school would be closing soon. Michael watched the man walk away, feeling more alone than ever. As the daylight faded, the streetlights seemed brighter. Michael noticed the sounds of traffic decreasing as the evening settled in. He was not sure how much longer he could sit there. The idea of walking home crossed his mind, but he knew it was not safe. He did not have a phone or a key. He was too young to be wandering the streets alone at night. He felt trapped, unable to move forward or backward. He tried to think positively again. Maybe his mother would appear at the last moment, running toward him and apologizing. Maybe she would have a small gift hidden in her bag. Maybe they would laugh about this later. But as he waited, his hopes dimmed. He realized that nobody had arrived yet, and it had been far too long. He could not deny that this was the worst birthday he had ever experienced. Just when he was about to give up on expecting anything good, he saw headlights from a car approaching slowly. At first he ignored it, thinking it was just another passerby. But then the car slowed down even more near the school entrance. Michael looked up, unsure of what to expect. He wondered if it could be someone sent by his mother, or maybe a neighbor who had learned of his situation. He had no idea who was behind the wheel, but at this point, he felt that any adult who stopped might be able to help. He watched the car closely as it pulled up near the curb. He tried to appear calm, even though he was trembling a bit from the cold and from his emotions. He waited to see if someone would get out of the car or call to him. He knew that he had to be careful with strangers, but he also knew that he could not wait alone forever. He hoped that whoever had stopped might be a responsible person who could assist him. Michael took a deep breath and prepared to speak if needed. He wondered if this would finally mark a change in the evening. At that moment, he did not know what would happen next, but he understood that he should not ignore a possible chance for help. He sat up straighter, wiped his face with his sleeve, and focused his attention on the vehicle. Perhaps this was the moment that would guide him toward a safer place, or at least provide some explanation for what had gone wrong. The car remained parked at the curb, and after a moment, the driver's door opened. A man stepped out and looked in Michael's direction. He wore a neatly tailored suit and appeared to be in his late 40s. He had a calm, steady way of moving as he approached the school steps. Michael watched him carefully, uncertain about what might happen next. The man stopped a few feet away and spoke in a gentle voice, asking if Michael was all right. Michael hesitated, not sure if he should respond. He noticed that the man did not look angry or suspicious. Instead, he seemed concerned. Michael considered his options. He did not have any other adult offering help, and the school would close soon. He decided to answer the man's question. He explained that he had been waiting for his mother, who had not arrived. He mentioned that school ended hours ago and that everyone else had gone home. The man listened carefully, nodding. He introduced himself as Mr. Anderson, saying he was just passing by and noticed the boy sitting alone. He asked if Michael had a phone number for his mother or a way to reach her. Michael provided his mother's phone number. He also mentioned that she worked as a nurse and that it was his birthday today. As he said the word birthday, his voice trembled slightly. Mr. Anderson picked up on the detail and took out his cell phone. He called the number Michael gave him. It rang, and after a few moments, someone answered. He stepped away a bit to have a brief conversation, leaving Michael waiting again. While Mr. Anderson spoke on the phone, Michael tried to guess what would happen next. He hoped that this man would be able to help somehow. He knew he had to be cautious, but Mr. Anderson did not seem dangerous. He seemed like someone who wanted to help. Michael felt a small sense of relief that at least he was not alone now. Mr. Anderson returned to Michael and explained the situation. He said he had managed to speak to Michael's mother briefly. She was in the middle of an emergency procedure at the hospital. She said she could not leave and that it might be hours before she could come for Michael. She sounded worried and stressed. Mr. Anderson told Michael that his mother wanted him to be safe and asked if Mr. Anderson could help him get home. Michael did not know what to say. He felt uneasy about getting into a car with a stranger. He remembered all the advice he had been given about strangers. However, he also knew that staying here in the cold, with the school about to close, was not a good option. He asked Mr. Anderson if there was anyone else he could call, maybe a relative or a family friend. Mr. Anderson tried to call another number, Michael recalled, but there was no answer. They tried twice more, without success. It became clear that Michael's mother had no backup plan for this situation. Michael felt a wave of sadness. He understood that it was not her fault. She was just doing her job. Still, he wished that someone else could step in, but there was no one. Mr. Anderson knelt down to talk to Michael at eye level. He said that if Michael did not feel comfortable going with him, he could call the police or child services to assist. He did not want to force anything. He wanted Michael to feel safe. Michael thought about these options. He imagined the police arriving, asking questions. He imagined waiting in some unfamiliar place until his mother finished work. The idea made him nervous. He looked at Mr. Anderson, who was waiting patiently for his decision. The man's presence was calm and steady. Michael thought about how Mr. Anderson had offered to call the authorities if that made him feel safer. It suggested that the man understood boundaries and was not trying to hide anything. Michael decided to trust him. He said he would go with Mr. Anderson, but he wanted him to promise that he would take him straight home. Mr. Anderson agreed and asked for Michael's address. Michael gave it to him and picked up his backpack, standing up and adjusting his sweatshirt. They walked to the car. Before they got in, Mr. Anderson opened his trunk and showed Michael that there was nothing dangerous inside. He even showed the back seat was empty. Michael appreciated this gesture, although he did not say it out loud. Michael sat in the back, and Mr. Anderson got behind the wheel. The man drove away from the school slowly, following the directions Michael provided. The boy looked out the window at the darkening streets. He felt a mix of relief and worry. He was relieved not to be alone anymore, but worried about how this stranger had appeared on his birthday and how everything had fallen apart. As they drove, Mr. Anderson tried to make small talk. He asked about Michael's school, what grade he was in, and what subjects he liked. Michael answered quietly, still feeling uneasy. He did not know what to expect, but as they passed by a bakery with a display of cakes in the window, Michael felt tears forming in his eyes. He thought about his birthday again. Mr. Anderson noticed that Michael's mood seemed to worsen. He asked if something was wrong. Michael hesitated, then admitted that today was his birthday and that he had expected a small celebration. Now it seemed that there would be no cake, no singing, and no special moment to mark the occasion. He tried to hide his disappointment, but he could not. Mr. Anderson took a moment before responding. He said that it was not right for a child to spend his birthday feeling abandoned and sad. He asked Michael if it would be all right to make a short stop before taking him home. He promised that it was just to do something small for his birthday and then continue to his house. Michael was unsure, but the man's offer sounded kind. He decided to trust him again. Mr. Anderson turned the car toward a small neighborhood bakery that was still open. He parked and invited Michael to come inside. Michael followed, feeling nervous but curious. Inside, the warm lights and sweet smells comforted him. There were cakes, pastries, and cookies. Mr. Anderson asked the person behind the counter for a small birthday cake. Michael watched quietly as a simple chocolate cake with a single candle was prepared. Mr. Anderson guided Michael to a small table. He lit the candle and asked Michael to make a wish. Michael, feeling shy and emotional, closed his eyes and wished for a future where he would not have to wait alone on his birthday. Then he blew out the candle. He took a piece of cake, and it tasted good. He felt strange celebrating his birthday with a stranger, but he also felt grateful that someone cared enough to stop and help. After the short celebration, they returned to the car. Mr. Anderson assured Michael that he would still take him home. Michael gave the address again, and Mr. Anderson followed the directions carefully. While driving, he asked more about Michael's situation. Michael explained that his mother worked 2 jobs, that his father had left them long ago, and that it had been tough ever since. Mr. Anderson listened without interrupting. He seemed genuinely concerned. He did not make judgments or offer false sympathy. He simply let Michael speak. By the time they approached Michael's house, the boy felt calmer and more trusting. He realized that Mr. Anderson had not just offered a ride, but also a sense of care that had been missing today. They arrived in front of Michael's home, a modest apartment building. Mr. Anderson parked and said he would wait until Michael safely got inside. Michael thanked him quietly. He used his key from under the doormat to open the front door and stepped inside. Before leaving, Mr. Anderson said he would check on them tomorrow. He wanted to make sure Michael's mother knew about what had happened. Michael agreed. As Mr. Anderson drove away, Michael stood in the small hallway of his building, still holding the leftover birthday cake. He felt relieved to be home, but the evening had left him with many questions. He locked the door behind him, turned on the light, and realized he was now safe. He hoped his mother would come home soon. For now, he just had to wait. Late that night, Michael's mother still had not returned. Michael ate a small piece of the cake and drank some water. He did not have any other food ready at home, so he decided to go to bed early. He changed into his pajamas, brushed his teeth, and tried to read a book he had borrowed from the school library, but his mind wandered. He kept thinking about the day's events. He wondered if Mr. Anderson would really come back. He also wondered if his mother would understand how hard it had been to wait for her. He knew she had important responsibilities and that emergencies happened, but he wished there was a better plan for situations like this. He worried that if something similar happened again, he might end up in another difficult position. The next morning, Michael woke up early. He got dressed and prepared a simple breakfast for himself. He was used to doing this. His mother often left him some cereal and milk, and he knew how to manage on his own. Still, it felt lonely. He did not like that his mother had to work so much. He did not blame her, but he wished life could be easier. He left for school at the usual time, walking the few blocks on his own. He was careful, as he always was, looking both ways before crossing the street. He arrived at Hawthorne Elementary School a bit early, waiting with other students in the yard until the doors opened. Some classmates greeted him, and he forced a smile. But inside he was still thinking about the previous day. In class, he tried to focus on the lessons. He wrote down notes, answered questions, and did his best to pay attention. But every now and then, his mind drifted back to that cold afternoon and the unexpected kindness of a stranger. He also wondered if his mother would have any news or changes to share. He knew it was unlikely, since nothing ever seemed to change much. At lunchtime, Michael sat alone at a table. He did not feel like talking to anyone. He finished his sandwich and milk quickly, and then opened his math workbook. While he was looking at some practice problems, he noticed a figure approaching. He looked up and saw Mr. Anderson standing with the school principal near the cafeteria entrance. Michael felt a sudden nervousness. He had not expected to see Mr. Anderson at school. The principal called Michael over, and he stood up, walking toward them. The principal introduced Mr. Anderson to Michael properly, explaining that Mr. Anderson had contacted the school office earlier. He had explained what happened the previous day and was there to help Michael in any way possible. The principal assured Michael that Mr. Anderson's intentions were good and that he had the school's permission to speak with him. Mr. Anderson asked if Michael's mother had returned yet. Michael shook his head and said that she had not been home when he woke up, which meant she probably stayed overnight at the hospital. Mr. Anderson nodded. He said that he had tried calling her again, but she was either too busy or her phone was off. He understood that her work was important, but he still felt concerned about Michael's situation. Michael was not sure what to say. He felt embarrassed that an outsider had stepped into his life, noticing the problems he and his mother faced. He worried that it might make them look bad. He did not want anyone thinking his mother was irresponsible. Mr. Anderson seemed to understand this and quickly clarified that he was not blaming anyone. He only wanted to help. The principal suggested that Mr. Anderson and Michael speak in a quieter place. They moved to a small office near the cafeteria. There, Mr. Anderson asked Michael more questions about his daily life. Michael explained that his mother worked 2 hospital jobs to pay the bills and that he often had to wait or manage on his own. He said she had tried her best, but emergencies always seemed to come at the worst times. Mr. Anderson listened carefully. He did not judge or show pity, only understanding. He asked Michael if he liked school and what he hoped to do in the future. Michael said he wanted to do well in class and maybe become a teacher or a writer someday. Mr. Anderson smiled and said that was a good goal. He seemed genuinely interested in Michael's thoughts. Before leaving, Mr. Anderson told Michael that he would speak with his mother as soon as possible. He wanted to propose something that might help. He did not give details, but he hinted that he might have a solution that could make their lives easier. Michael was curious but did not press for answers. He was just glad that someone cared enough to think about their situation. The principal walked Mr. Anderson out, and Michael returned to the cafeteria to gather his things before afternoon classes. He felt a bit lighter than before. He still did not know what Mr. Anderson had in mind, but the idea that something could change was encouraging. He attended his afternoon classes with a bit more focus and finished his school day without incident. After school, Michael followed his normal routine. He stayed for a short, after-school program where he read books and worked on his homework. He wondered if Mr. Anderson would call his mother today. He also wondered how his mother would react to the involvement of this stranger in their lives. He hoped she would not be upset. When the after-school program ended, Michael walked home again. He arrived at the apartment to find a short note from his mother. She had come home briefly that morning while he was at school. The note said she was very sorry for not being able to pick him up the day before. She explained that she had faced an unavoidable emergency. She also wrote that she knew he might feel disappointed and that she would try to make it up to him soon. There was no mention of Mr. Anderson in the note, so perhaps she had not spoken with him yet. Michael sighed and started preparing a simple dinner for himself. He ate quietly, thinking about how yesterday had been his birthday. Yet it felt as if it had come and gone without any real celebration, except for that short moment at the bakery. He was grateful to Mr. Anderson for at least marking the day in some small way. He could not deny that it had helped. As night fell, Michael finished his homework and tidied the small living room. He placed the leftover cake in the refrigerator, hoping that maybe he and his mother could share it later when she returned. He turned on the television for a while, watching a quiet program, but his mind was too full of questions to concentrate. He knew that Mr. Anderson's involvement was unusual, but he did not feel uneasy about it now. Instead, he felt curious and hopeful. Maybe this man knew a way to help his mother find a better job or a schedule that allowed her to spend more time with him. Maybe this situation would not repeat itself next year. Michael turned off the television, got ready for bed, and wondered what tomorrow would bring. The following morning, Michael woke up before his alarm. He checked the apartment. but his mother still had not returned. He knew her job sometimes required overnight shifts, especially if there were medical emergencies. Still, he felt uneasy about the situation. He had hoped they might talk this morning. He dressed quickly and ate a simple breakfast. He took a moment to look at the small remaining piece of cake in the refrigerator. He decided to leave it there, hoping he could share it with his mother later. When Michael arrived at school, he joined his classmates in the hallway before the bell rang. He tried to focus on the day ahead, but he kept wondering when his mother would have time to talk to him. He also thought about Mr. Anderson's promise to speak with her. He was not sure if that conversation had taken place yet. The uncertainty made him feel a bit restless, but he tried to concentrate on his studies. During morning classes, Michael worked on math problems and listened carefully to the teacher's instructions. He wanted to keep his mind occupied. He had always enjoyed school because it gave him a chance to learn and keep busy. Even so, he could not completely push aside his concerns. He remembered what Mr. Anderson had said about helping. He did not know exactly what form that help would take, but he hoped it could improve their situation. At lunchtime, Michael took his tray and sat down at a small table. He ate quietly, thinking about how Mr. Anderson had come to the school the previous day. It had been surprising to see him there. He realized that Mr. Anderson's involvement was not normal. Most adults did not go to such lengths for a child they had just met. Michael appreciated that the man seemed truly interested in helping rather than causing trouble. After a few minutes, one of the administrative staff members approached Michael in the cafeteria and said that someone wanted to see him in the office. Michael felt a bit nervous, but he picked up his tray and followed her. When he entered the office, he saw Mr. Anderson sitting there with the principal. Michael noticed a phone on the desk and guessed that maybe they were about to call his mother. The principal explained that Mr. Anderson had managed to reach Michael's mother on the phone. She was available to talk for a few minutes. The principal handed the phone to Michael, and he spoke quietly. His mother sounded tired, but relieved to hear his voice. She apologized again for missing his birthday and for leaving him waiting at school. Michael said he understood she was working, but he felt sad that he had been alone for so long. Mr. Anderson sat nearby, listening silently, not wanting to interfere. After a short conversation, Michael's mother said she wanted to speak with Mr. Anderson as well. Michael handed the phone to him. Mr. Anderson introduced himself politely and explained that he had encountered Michael at the school steps. He spoke calmly about how he wanted to help. He mentioned that he understood how demanding her schedule was and that he had a potential solution in mind. Michael could not hear every detail, but he picked up bits and pieces. He heard Mr. Anderson mention a position at one of his companies, flexible hours, and a salary that might allow her to reduce her hospital shifts. He explained that it was not a gift, but a genuine job offer. He said he believed that her experience in a clinical environment could translate into a useful administrative role. He did not promise huge wealth, but a stable position that could improve their quality of life. Michael listened carefully. He realized that Mr. Anderson was not just kind. He was trying to find a long-term way to help them. He could almost feel his heart beating faster as he waited for his mother's response. There was a long pause, and then Mr. Anderson nodded, saying he understood her hesitation. He explained that he would not pressure her. He only asked that she consider the offer seriously. After a bit more back and forth, Mr. Anderson handed the phone back to Michael. His mother said she was surprised by this sudden opportunity. She did not want to rely on charity, but Mr. Anderson assured her it was not charity. It was a chance for her to use her skills in a more manageable schedule. She finally agreed to meet with Mr. Anderson the next day after her shift to discuss the details. Michael felt a spark of hope. He thanked his mother for considering it, and they ended the call on a more positive note than before. The principal was pleased that a possible solution was being discussed. She told Michael he could return to lunch if he wanted. Michael nodded, but he first thanked Mr. Anderson for his help. Mr. Anderson said he was happy to do it. He explained that he wanted to make sure that Michael and his mother had a better balance in their lives. Michael nodded quietly and returned to the cafeteria with a lighter heart. In the afternoon classes, Michael was more focused. He felt that something positive was happening. If his mother took the job Mr. Anderson offered, maybe she would not have to work 2 hospital jobs anymore. Maybe she would have time to be home when he needed her, and maybe they could celebrate birthdays and other important moments together. It felt like a small ray of hope after a long period of struggle. After school, Michael went to his after-school program as usual. He completed his homework and thought about what would happen tomorrow. He imagined his mother meeting with Mr. Anderson, talking about responsibilities and schedules. He wondered if she would accept the job. He knew it might be risky for her to leave her secure positions at the hospitals, but he also knew how tired and stressed she had been. Maybe this was what they both needed. Walking home, Michael felt more confident. He arrived at his apartment to find a note taped to the door. It was from his mother. She had returned briefly to leave him dinner in the refrigerator and to confirm that she would meet Mr. Anderson the next day. She wrote that she loved him and that she was proud of him for handling himself so well. Michael smiled and went inside. He heated up the meal she had left, enjoying a proper dinner for the first time in days. That evening, Michael sat at the kitchen table thinking about the changes that might come. He understood that nothing was guaranteed. His mother still had to sign a contract or agree to terms with Mr. Anderson. But the fact that someone had noticed their difficult situation and offered a real solution made him feel more secure. He tried to imagine a future where his mother worked fewer hours and was more present in his daily life. He knew he should not get his hopes too high until things were official. Still, he felt a calmness that he had not felt in a long time. He cleaned up after his dinner, set out his clothes for school, and read a little bit from a textbook before bed. He fell asleep hoping that tomorrow would bring good news. The next morning, Michael went through his usual routine. He dressed, ate breakfast, and headed to school. He knew that later in the day his mother would meet with Mr. Anderson. He tried not to think about it too much in class, but it was difficult to ignore the importance of this meeting. He wondered how Mr. Anderson would present the job offer to his mother and what kind of role she would have. During the morning lessons, Michael listened to his teacher and took notes. He practiced some reading comprehension exercises and solved a few math problems. He noticed that he felt more hopeful today. Even though nothing had changed yet, the possibility of change made him feel more at ease. At lunch, he sat at a table with 2 classmates who asked him why he seemed happier. He just said he was feeling good today, without providing details. He wanted to keep this matter private until something was certain. He finished his meal and returned to class, focusing on the lessons and trying to stay patient. After school, Michael stayed for the after-school program again. He finished his assignments and checked the clock. He knew his mother's meeting with Mr. Anderson should be happening around this time. He imagined them sitting in an office, discussing her qualifications, the tasks she would perform, and how the schedule would work. He thought about how this might affect their daily life if she accepted the position. When the program ended, he walked home quietly, looking at the familiar streets. He wondered if he would arrive to find another note or, even better, his mother waiting for him at home. He thought about the day he spent sitting alone at school, waiting for her to appear. If this job worked out, maybe that kind of situation would never happen again. As he entered the apartment building, he noticed that the hallway light was on, and there were some quiet footsteps inside his apartment. He unlocked the door and stepped in. His mother was there, standing by the kitchen counter. She looked tired, but also relieved. Michael greeted her, and she smiled. She said she had met with Mr. Anderson that afternoon. Michael listened carefully as his mother explained the details. Mr. Anderson had offered her a role as an administrative coordinator in one of his companies. The position involved organizing schedules, handling paperwork, and assisting with certain business operations. It was not medical work. but it required attention to detail and good organizational skills. The salary was enough for her to leave one of the hospital jobs and reduce hours at the other, giving her more free time. Michael noticed that she seemed nervous but hopeful. She said she had accepted the offer. She would need to work a probationary period to prove herself, but that was normal. If all went well, she could transition out of her second hospital job entirely within a few weeks. She also mentioned that Mr. Anderson had spoken with her about the importance of being there for Michael and that he respected her dedication to nursing, but believed she could use her talents in a different way for a more balanced life. Michael felt a wave of relief. He thanked his mother and hugged her. He told her he was proud of her for trying something new. She smiled and said she hoped this would allow them to spend more time together. She admitted that it had been hard working 2 jobs, but she had felt trapped, unable to find a better alternative. This opportunity, she said, might be their chance at a more stable and happy life. They sat down at the small kitchen table and talked for a while. His mother asked about the past few days, what had happened at school, and how Michael felt about Mr. Anderson's involvement. Michael explained that at first he had been unsure, but as time went on, he realized that Mr. Anderson genuinely wanted to help. He was grateful that someone had noticed their struggle and offered a real solution. Michael's mother said that Mr. Anderson was very professional when they met. He did not make her feel like a charity case. He explained that he had considered her experience in healthcare and thought she could adapt those skills to an office environment. He was not offering a favor, but an opportunity for her to earn her position. They talked about what the next weeks would look like. His mother would have to balance her current hospital shifts and the new job training. It would be tough at first, but as soon as she felt comfortable, she could reduce her hospital hours. Eventually, she might settle into a stable schedule that allowed her to pick Michael up from school and spend evenings together. Michael felt excited. He remembered how it felt to sit alone on his birthday. He knew that even with this new job, there might still be days when unexpected things happened. But this time, his mother would not be so stretched thin. She might have more control over her schedule, and they might be able to celebrate important moments properly. That evening, they ate dinner together. It was a simple meal, but it felt special because his mother was home. Michael told her about his classes and the things he learned that day. She listened and asked questions, showing genuine interest. After dinner, they even looked at his homework together. It was a small change, but it felt meaningful. Before going to bed, Michael opened the refrigerator and saw the small piece of leftover birthday cake. He took it out and showed it to his mother. They decided to share it, even though his birthday had passed. His mother lit a small candle she found in a drawer, and they smiled at each other as Michael blew it out. It was not the original plan, but it was a moment of closure for that difficult day he had experienced. Later, when Michael went to bed, he felt a sense of comfort. He understood that life would not change overnight, but at least they were moving in a better direction. They had found a way forward with Mr. Anderson's help. He could sleep knowing that tomorrow might bring even more stability and that he would not have to face special days alone again. A few days passed as Michael's mother began the transition to her new schedule. She still worked at the hospital, but had started training for her new administrative position at Mr. Anderson's company. Each morning, after Michael left for school, she would spend several hours at the office, learning various tasks and meeting the team she would be working with. In the early afternoons, she would head to the hospital for a reduced shift. It was tiring, but it felt like progress. Michael noticed small changes at home. On some days, his mother managed to be back earlier than before. She would help him review his homework, ask him about his day, and sometimes they would watch a short program on television before dinner. The feeling of constant rushing began to fade. They still had responsibilities, but now there was a sense that they were moving toward a stable routine. At school, Michael maintained his focus on classes. He felt calmer than before. He knew that his mother was working toward a better schedule, and he felt grateful that Mr. Anderson had stepped in to offer a solution. Michael did not tell many people about what had happened. He preferred to keep it private, but the change in his mood was noticeable. His teachers and classmates found him more engaged, and he participated more confidently in group activities. One afternoon, Mr. Anderson visited the school office and asked the principal if he could speak with Michael for a moment. The principal agreed. Michael was called in during his lunch break. When he arrived at the office, he found Mr. Anderson waiting in a chair, looking at some papers. Mr. Anderson greeted him warmly and asked how things were going. Michael said that his mother had started the new job training and seemed happier. He mentioned that she still worked at the hospital but had reduced her hours. He thanked Mr. Anderson again for the opportunity he had provided. Mr. Anderson said he was glad to hear that. He explained that he would not interfere further unless asked, but he wanted to make sure that Michael and his mother were adjusting well. Michael appreciated the concern. He felt that Mr. Anderson understood their needs without making them feel uncomfortable. They spoke for a few minutes about school and plans for the future. Mr. Anderson encouraged Michael to keep working hard in class and to talk to his mother if he needed more support. Then Mr. Anderson said goodbye and left, allowing Michael to return to his lunch with a more confident smile. In the following days, Michael's mother gradually became more familiar with her new role. She learned how to manage schedules, arrange meetings, and keep track of important documents. The work environment was different from the hospital. It was quieter and had more predictable hours. Although it was not as high pressure as hospital work, it required concentration and organization. She found herself enjoying these tasks, knowing they would lead to a more balanced life. By the end of the second week of training, Michael's mother had a conversation with Mr. Anderson's human resources manager. They discussed a path to full-time employment in the administrative role. Once she completed her probationary period, she could leave her second hospital job entirely. This news lifted a weight off her shoulders. It meant that soon she would have a stable income without working around the clock. At home, Michael noticed that his mother seemed more rested. She still had long days, but the stress on her face had lessened. They began to share simple dinners more often. She asked him about his school projects and helped him plan for a small presentation he had to give in class. On one particular evening, Michael told her about a history assignment he was nervous about. She listened attentively and offered suggestions on how to organize his notes. This was a change from before, when she was often too tired or absent to help. Michael also noticed that he no longer feared being left waiting alone after school. His mother had arranged a proper schedule. On most days, she would be available to pick him up on time, or she would arrange for a trusted neighbor to watch him briefly if something unexpected came up. He realized that he did not have to rely on chance encounters to receive help. They had a plan now. As the weeks passed, the school staff also saw the difference in Michael. He was more relaxed, more open to participating in group discussions, and less guarded about personal matters. He did not share everything that happened outside school, but it was clear that he felt more secure in his life. The uncertainty that had weighed on him seemed to be lifting. Mr. Anderson did not visit the school again during that period, but Michael sometimes thought about him. He remembered the day the man stopped by the sidewalk, the warm bakery where they shared a small cake, and the quiet drive home. Michael understood that Mr. Anderson had taken a personal risk by getting involved. He could have driven on without stopping, but he chose to help. Michael respected that choice and felt grateful for it, even if he never said it out loud again. At the end of one training day, Michael's mother returned home with new documents to review. She explained to Michael that Mr. Anderson's company wanted her to handle scheduling for a new project. This would give her a chance to show her skills and secure the position permanently. Michael looked at the papers and tried to understand what they were about. He did not know much about business operations, but he could see that it involved careful planning. They sat at the kitchen table, and Michael helped by reading dates and times out loud while his mother took notes. It was a quiet activity, but it reminded him that they were working together to build a better life. He felt proud of his mother's ability to adapt and learn new things. He also felt proud of himself for being patient and responsible during the difficult weeks before. Before going to bed that night, Michael and his mother talked about the future. She mentioned that if all went well, she could leave her second hospital job within a month. Then, they would have more time for each other. They could plan outings, maybe visit a museum on a weekend, or just enjoy a quiet evening at home without constant worry. Michael smiled and said he looked forward to it. As he closed his eyes to sleep, Michael felt a sense of calm. He knew that life would not be perfect. There would still be long days, challenges, and responsibilities. But now there was hope and stability, something that he had longed for. He thought about the upcoming weeks and felt ready to face them, knowing that he and his mother were on the right path. A few more weeks passed, and Michael's mother continued to make progress in her new administrative role. She gradually reduced her shifts at the hospital, making it possible for her to be more involved in Michael's daily routine. Michael began to notice a pattern. His mother was home earlier on most days, and they could discuss his schoolwork and plan for upcoming events. One afternoon, as Michael returned home from school, he found his mother in the living room, reviewing work documents with a calm expression. She looked up and smiled, asking him how his day went. Michael described the science project he had started and the reading assignment for his English class. His mother listened attentively and asked thoughtful questions. This was a change from the past, when she often had only a few minutes to spare before rushing off to another job. Later that evening, they decided to organize the apartment together. They went through old papers, rearranged furniture slightly, and made a list of small improvements they wanted to make. The apartment was modest, but it was their home, and now they had a chance to make it more comfortable. Michael enjoyed feeling involved in these decisions, and his mother appreciated his help and input. Over dinner, Michael's mother mentioned that her probationary period at Mr. Anderson's company was ending soon. She had received positive feedback from her supervisor, and it seemed likely that she would be offered a permanent position. Michael felt happy hearing this. He knew that a permanent position meant more predictability and less worry. They would finally have a stable income without the constant stress of juggling multiple jobs. Michael's mother also explained that once she accepted the permanent position, she would completely leave her second hospital job. She would still keep one hospital shift per week, as it was important for her to maintain some connection to nursing, but it would no longer dominate her schedule. Michael understood that nursing had been an important part of her life, and he respected her decision to keep a small part of it. At the same time, he felt relieved that she would no longer be so overworked. A few days later, Mr. Anderson asked if Michael's mother could meet him briefly at the office. She arrived on time, wearing professional attire and carrying a notebook. Mr. Anderson greeted her and thanked her for the work she had done during her probationary period. He mentioned the positive reports he had received from her supervisor and colleagues. He said that her organizational skills, attention to detail, and professional attitude had impressed everyone. He then offered her a permanent administrative position with a salary and schedule that would allow her to focus on the company's needs and her family's well-being. Michael's mother felt a sense of gratitude and achievement. She thanked Mr. Anderson and agreed to the terms. She knew that this would mark a new chapter in their lives, one in which she could balance work and parenting more effectively. Back at home, Michael's mother shared the good news with him. He congratulated her, feeling proud that she had found a better path. They celebrated by preparing a simple meal together, talking about how this would change their daily lives. She would have more time to help him with school projects, attend parent-teacher conferences, and celebrate birthdays on the actual day rather than postponing them. As the weeks went by, the new routine settled in. Michael woke up each morning knowing that his mother would be there to see him off. He returned home in the afternoon, often finding her already finished with work, reviewing documents from home or occasionally heading into the office for a few hours when needed. The stress that had once defined their lives had diminished. Michael still remembered the day he waited alone at school. He remembered feeling abandoned and hopeless. Now he saw that day as a turning point. It had been the moment when Mr. Anderson noticed him and decided to stop and help. That single act of kindness had set in motion a series of events that led to this improved situation. Michael learned that sometimes one small decision could change a person's life. At school, Michael continued to do well. He became more active in class discussions and volunteered to read aloud or share his thoughts. He participated in a small group project about local history, working cooperatively with classmates and feeling confident in his contributions. He realized that having a stable and supportive home environment made it easier to focus on learning and personal growth. His mother also noticed changes in herself. With a more balanced schedule, she could take better care of her health and well-being. She felt less exhausted and more capable of guiding Michael. She had time to prepare healthier meals, keep the apartment organized, and plan activities for weekends. She also began to think about her own interests outside of work. Perhaps she could take an evening class or start a small hobby. For now, she was simply enjoying the calm. From time to time, they would talk about Mr. Anderson. Michael's mother had met with him a few times at the company, and each time, he treated her with respect and professionalism. He never brought up the past situation in a way that embarrassed her. Instead, he focused on the future and the work they needed to do. Michael admired that approach. It showed that Mr. Anderson was not interested in pity or charity, only in providing opportunities. As the end of the week approached, Michael and his mother planned a small celebration. It was not a birthday or a holiday, just a quiet acknowledgement of how far they had come. They decided to buy a small cake from the local bakery. This time, Michael would not have to share cake with a stranger on his birthday. He would share it with his mother on an ordinary day that felt special because of what they had achieved together. They sat at the kitchen table that evening, slices of cake on their plates. They talked about what they wanted to do in the coming months. Perhaps visit a museum, watch a school play, or organize a small gathering with neighbors. None of these plans were grand, but they represented a sense of control and comfort that had been missing before. As Michael cleaned up and got ready for bed, he felt secure. He knew that his mother had a good job, stable hours, and the ability to be part of his life in ways that mattered. He understood that this would not solve every problem. Life could still be unpredictable. But now they had a foundation that allowed them to face challenges with confidence. He went to sleep that night feeling hopeful about the days ahead. Several weeks later, Michael and his mother had settled into a new, more manageable routine. His mother had accepted the permanent position at Mr. Anderson's company, and her schedule allowed her to be home in the afternoons and evenings. She no longer raced from one hospital shift to another. Instead, she worked regular hours at the office, with just one short hospital shift on weekends to keep her nursing skills active. Michael noticed that he woke up each morning feeling calmer. He no longer worried about whether his mother would be there after school or if he would have to wait alone again. He understood that work emergencies could still happen, but now they had backup plans and more support. The feeling of uncertainty that had once weighed him down had faded. At school, Michael's teachers observed that he was more engaged and enthusiastic about learning. He participated in class discussions and volunteered to help classmates when they had trouble understanding the material. He felt confident because he knew that at home, things were stable. If he had a difficult assignment or an upcoming test, he could count on his mother's guidance. At home, small but meaningful changes were visible. There was a quiet, comfortable rhythm to their evenings. After Michael returned from school and his mother came home from work, they would spend time discussing the day's events. Sometimes they prepared dinner together. Michael learned how to chop vegetables or measure ingredients while his mother guided him. After dinner, they might watch a simple television show, read or talk about upcoming school projects. One afternoon, Michael's mother mentioned that she needed to schedule a meeting with Michael's teacher. Not because there was a problem, but because she finally had time to discuss his progress and consider ways to support his academic interests. Previously, she had struggled to find time for these meetings. Now it was easy to arrange them. Michael felt proud that his mother wanted to be more involved in his education. In addition to supporting Michael's studies, his mother also began to explore her own personal interests. She had always loved reading, but had not found the time to do it regularly. Now, after Michael went to bed, she sometimes read a book or researched new skills she could learn to advance in her administrative role. She saw this period as a chance to grow professionally and personally, not just a way to pay the bills. Michael understood that their lives were not suddenly perfect. His mother still had responsibilities at work. There were occasional busy days or unexpected tasks that came up. But these challenges felt manageable compared to the constant pressure they once faced. Michael knew that if something important came up, his mother would communicate with him, and they would find a solution together. From time to time, they spoke about how this change had happened. Michael remembered how frightened and sad he had been on his birthday, sitting alone at school. He recalled the first time he saw Mr. Anderson and how uncertain he had felt. Looking back, he realized that Mr. Anderson's appearance had been a turning point. Without his intervention, Michael and his mother might still be stuck in their old pattern of long, exhausting hours and limited family time. Michael's mother also expressed gratitude for Mr. Anderson's help. She described him as a respectful and understanding employer who treated her like a valued member of the team. She said that working in his company's administrative office was challenging in a different way from hospital work. It required planning, communication, and organizational skills. Although it was not nursing, it allowed her to use her abilities to improve their lives. On the weekends, Michael and his mother started to do small activities together. They visited the local library to pick out books. They went to a nearby park and enjoyed the fresh air. They occasionally stopped by a bakery on Saturday mornings to have a treat before running errands. Each small outing reminded Michael of how far they had come since that lonely afternoon at the school steps. Michael's classmates and neighbors noticed the changes as well. A neighbor who had once watched Michael briefly after school commented on how happy Michael and his mother seemed now. The neighbor remembered how stressed his mother had been, always rushing to the hospital. Now she saw them walking home together, talking calmly, carrying groceries or discussing the day's events. Michael's teacher also commented on his improved focus and willingness to participate. She said that having a supportive home environment often made a big difference in a student's performance. Michael understood that support was not just about helping with homework. It was about knowing someone was there to listen and care about his experiences. Sometimes Michael thought about writing a thank you note to Mr. Anderson. He was not sure what to say, but he knew he wanted to express his gratitude for that day when Mr. Anderson had stopped his car and noticed a boy sitting alone. Without that moment, things might not have improved as they did. As the months passed, the season changed. The colder days were behind them, and the weather became milder. Michael and his mother made a plan to celebrate the anniversary of her new job. It was not an official holiday, just a personal reminder of their progress. They decided to cook a nice meal at home and invite a neighbor who had helped them in the past. Michael wanted to show that they appreciated the kindness and support they had received, both from Mr. Anderson and from people around them. That evening, they prepared a simple but tasty dinner. Michael's mother carefully followed a recipe, and Michael helped by setting the table. Their neighbor brought a small dessert. As they ate and talked, Michael felt a sense of belonging. He realized that the fear and uncertainty he had once carried with him were gone. In their place was a quiet confidence that came from knowing they had found a stable path forward. After the neighbor left, Michael and his mother cleaned up and sat together in the living room. They talked about the future. Maybe someday Michael would go to a good college. Maybe he would become a teacher or a writer, as he once mentioned. His mother said she supported whatever he wanted to do. Knowing that she would be there, involved and caring, gave Michael the motivation to try his best in everything he did. That night, Michael went to sleep feeling grateful. He knew that life would keep moving, bringing new challenges and changes. But now they were better prepared. They had the stability, resources, and understanding to face whatever came next. The memory of waiting alone at school had been replaced by a more hopeful understanding of what people could achieve when they helped each other. In the following weeks, Michael and his mother continued to enjoy the rhythm they had established. He progressed steadily in his studies, and she managed her responsibilities at work and home with confidence. They no longer felt rushed at every moment. Instead, they approached their tasks methodically, knowing they had the time to handle them properly. Michael's mother found that her new administrative role suited her well. She had a natural ability to keep track of details and ensure that schedules ran smoothly. She worked closely with colleagues who respected her input and relied on her organizational skills. Although the work was different from nursing, she still felt a sense of purpose. She was helping people in another way, by making sure that operations ran efficiently and that others could do their jobs without unnecessary complications. One afternoon, Michael's mother received a phone call from Mr. Anderson's office. He wanted to speak with her briefly. She went to see him, feeling a bit curious about what he might have to say. He thanked her for the hard work she had put into the recent project. He mentioned that the company had benefited from her attention to detail and suggested that she consider taking on additional responsibilities in the future. It was not a promotion just yet, but it was an indication that she was valued and that there was room for growth in her position. She came home that day and told Michael about the conversation. Michael congratulated her, feeling proud that she was making a difference and gaining recognition for her work. She said she might consider attending a few professional development workshops to improve her skills and advance in her career. Michael encouraged her, knowing that each positive step made their lives more secure. A few days later, Michael's teacher contacted his mother for a meeting. When they met, the teacher praised Michael's progress and mentioned that he seemed more confident and engaged than ever before. She asked if there was something different at home. Michael's mother explained that she had changed jobs to have a more stable schedule. The teacher smiled, saying it was clear that the support and stability at home had a positive impact on Michael's performance. Michael's mother thanked the teacher for noticing. She realized that the changes in their lives did not just benefit them directly. They also affected Michael's potential and his ability to grow academically and socially. It felt good to know that their efforts were producing visible results. At home, Michael continued to enjoy their routine. He explored new interests, read books from the library, and considered joining an after-school club. He knew that if he needed a ride or had a school event, his mother would likely be able to attend. He felt free to make plans, knowing that their schedule was no longer a constant obstacle. They also remembered to take time to relax. On weekends, they sometimes visited the park, took a walk, or tried a new recipe. Nothing extravagant, but each activity reinforced the idea that they could live a balanced life. Michael recalled how he once envied classmates whose parents arrived on time to pick them up and celebrate birthdays. Now, he had that too. Occasionally, Michael and his mother would talk about Mr. Anderson. They knew he was busy running his company and probably helping many people in different ways. Michael's mother mentioned that she appreciated how Mr. Anderson never tried to make them feel indebted. He simply offered an opportunity, treated her like a professional, and let her prove herself. That respect made all the difference. Michael still thought about writing a thank you note, but he decided that perhaps the best way to show gratitude was to work hard, do well in school, and continue to appreciate the better life they now had. He felt that living well and making good use of the opportunities they had been given was its own form of thank you. As the weeks turned into months, the memory of that lonely afternoon on the school steps faded, replaced by new memories of warmth and support. Michael remembered it occasionally, but now it served as a reminder of how quickly life could change for the better if the right chance appeared and was embraced. At the end of the school year, Michael received a report card that reflected steady improvement in all subjects. He and his mother reviewed it together at the kitchen table. She praised his efforts, and he thanked her for being there when he needed help. They both understood that this success was a team effort, made possible by the stability in their home life. On a sunny Saturday, they decided to invite a few neighbors over for a small gathering to celebrate the beginning of a new season. It was not a big party, just a few people sharing snacks, stories, and laughter. Michael's mother realized that she had the energy and time to build a community around them, something she could never do before, when she was always exhausted. After the guests left, Michael and his mother cleaned up and sat down with a cup of tea. They talked about the next school year and what goals Michael might set for himself. He said he wanted to improve his writing skills and maybe participate in a school club. She said she would support him in any way she could. As the evening light softened, Michael thought about everything that had happened. His life felt stable, and he felt cared for. He knew that challenges could arise again in the future, but now they had the tools, the schedule, and the support to handle them. He thought about how one person's decision to help had changed their lives. Without Mr. Anderson's intervention, who knew how long they would have struggled? Michael went to bed that night with a quiet sense of peace. The struggle of waiting alone at the school steps was a distant memory, replaced by the knowledge that his mother would always do her best to be present. He understood that nothing was guaranteed in life, but the foundation they had built was strong enough to weather many storms. They had not become wealthy or moved to a bigger home, but they had found what they really needed: stability, understanding, and the freedom to live their daily lives without constant worry. As Michael drifted off to sleep, he felt certain that this new balance would guide them through whatever came next.